of their wages or quality of life. And in the labor movement, that really, it sums up why we take...
There are about 15 minutes left in this event, which you can see at cspan.org. Going now live to the House for votes on bills debated earlier today.
Will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. The remaining electronic vote will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3521 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3521, a bill to authorize Department of Veterans Affairs major medical facility leases and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? The members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
Members are voting on a bill that authorizes $237 million for leases at 27 medical facilities around the country for the Veterans Affairs Department. Wanted to give you an update on the Senate. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell attempted today to overturn November's change in the Senate rules, which lowered the number of votes needed to advance most judicial and executive nominations, but Democrats rejected that move. The Senate then went on to confirm Patricia Millett to be a judge on the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, making her the first judicial nominee of President Obama's to clear the Senate since Democrats changed the rules last month. Patricia Millett was confirmed with a vote of 56 to 38, and the rule change means only a simple majority is needed to end a filibuster on nominations below the level of the Supreme Court. And this afternoon, the Senate has been debating another nomination, the nomination of Mel Watt to head the Federal Housing Finance Agency. The time for debate is running out this hour. We expect around 4 Eastern, and our Capitol Hill producer says it is likely there could be a final vote on Mel Watt's confirmation this afternoon in the Senate. Meanwhile, here in the House, members are working on a number of minor bills while negotiations continue on the federal budget, the Farm Bill, and other issues. One of the measures members are trying to finish before the end of the year is the Defense Programs Bill. Here's more on that. Megan Scully, Defense and National Security reporter for CQ Roll Call, joining us. The chairs of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee on Monday unveiled a compromise version of the Defense Programs Bill. What's in this new version?
Well, the bill contains several of the sexual assault provisions that were in both versions of the House version and the Senate version of the bills. It also contains a compromise on detainees, as well as new authorizations for several weapon systems and a military pay raise.
What prompted this compromise?
Well, the bill, the Senate was unable to pass the bill last month, and it stalled there. In order to get the bill done before the end of the calendar year, the leaders of the two committees met and hammered out the differences in the bill that had been before the Senate and the House-passed bill to come up with a compromise version of the measure that they hope can get through both chambers before they adjourn for the year.
You mentioned a sexual assault in the military. What are some of the other controversial amendments that were a part of the original Senate bill?
Sure. Well, actually one of the issues that did not make the bill is probably one of the more the biggest highlights, and that's Senator Gillibrand's amendment that would have taken the decision for prosecuting those crimes out of the chain of command. She had gotten support from more than half of the Senate, but never got a vote on her amendment. She still was 60 votes, or she was still a few votes shy of the 60 that she would have needed to get that through the Senate.
What about Iran sanctions?
There is nothing in the bill on Iran sanctions. Part of the reason why the bill stalled in the Senate last month was because Republicans wanted to introduce several amendments, including at least one on Iran sanctions. The White House has not wanted that debated right now, so this compromise measure does not have anything on that.
Republican Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma has been vocal about his opposition to the new compromise version. What are his concerns, and are those echoed by other lawmakers?
Sure, he's definitely not alone. They are angry that there has not been many amendments debated on this bill in the Senate. It's a bill that typically can take 2 to 3 weeks of Senate floor time, and it stalled this year over concerns about the stunted amendment debate. Senator Coburn has 8 amendments that he would like to see included in the bill, or at least debated, and many other lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have amendments that got scuttled. There seems to be concerns across the Republican Party that, that this is setting a bad precedent for the bill and that it's a path they don't want to go down.
What happens if Congress is not able to pass the defense programs bill before leaving for the holiday recess?
Sure. Well, the bill does not expire at the end of this year, since it's not the end of a Congress. However, several authorities do expire by December 31st, and most of those involve special pay, including combat pay for members of the military, as well as some bonuses. Now, those could be made retroactive, which is a point that Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, hinted at today. They could come back, debate the Senate bill, and then do a traditional conference between a Senate-passed bill and the House-passed bill, and pass a final conference report in January. However, there's concerns, Senator Levin, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, is concerned that pushing the bill into January will mean it never gets done. It'll get lost in next year's agenda.
We've heard members on both the House and the Senate and on both sides of the aisle talk about that this defense programs bill has been enacted annually for more than a half-century. Why is that significant?
Sure. Well, it's one of the few authorization bills, I think it might be the only authorization bill that has gotten passed every year for that period of time. It gives the Senate and House Armed Services Committees a tremendous amount of power in their ability to prescribe Pentagon policy and set funding levels, kind of power that other oversight committees would kill to have. It's a bill that has a tremendous, the pay raises, the combat pay and the other authorizations in the bill make it a vehicle that most lawmakers would want to see go through every year. It's considered a must-pass piece of legislation.
Megan Scully is a defense and national security reporter for CQ Roll Call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Federal regulators, including the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and the SEC, voted today to approve the Volcker Rule, which bars banks from trading for their own gain and limits their ability to invest in hedge funds. The New York Times reports that the votes strike at the heart of Wall Street risk-taking and represent a turning point in financial reform. Here's part of the discussion surrounding the vote today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the staff proposal to finalize this rule and also the proposal to extend the conformance period. I, too, want to join in congratulating the staff for completing the work on this rulemaking. It's obviously involved a huge amount of work and some very difficult judgments. I strongly support the goal of the rule, which is to eliminate short-term financial speculation in institutions that enjoy the protection of the safety net, but it's also important for the liquidity of financial markets and also for the safety and soundness of financial institutions that they be permitted to engage in market making and hedging. You've obviously worked very thoughtfully to strike in this rule just the right balance, and I congratulate you for doing that. Given the absence of a lot of bright line distinctions, I think supervisors are going to bear going forward a very important responsibility to make sure that this rule really works as intended. But I support and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. Governor Trujillo?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for the reasons I noted in, pardon me, my introductory statement, I too support the adoption of the final rule. But like the Vice Chair and you have both already indicated, implementation here, more than I think in most rules, is probably going to be key. And as I noted earlier, although we have a role to play there, we're sort of a third-place role but one which I think nonetheless our supervisors are going to have to navigate pretty carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've always attempted to set a high bar for us and our regulatory colleagues in the context of rulemaking. My assessment of this proposed final rule is that collectively we have come very far towards hitting that high bar. We've strengthened the hedging language to clearly require that hedges have to be tied to specific positions or aggregated specific positions in order to qualify for the hedging permitted activity. In addition, hedging positions must demonstrably reduce or otherwise significantly mitigate identifiable specific risks identified at the inception of the hedging trade and must demonstrably reduce added or newly developed risks. In other words, the hedge cannot add significant new risk to the position to be hedged. And there is an attestation requirement now for the person at the top, the CEO, who will be required to make appropriate inquiries about whether the design of the compliance program reasonably meets the statutory requirements prohibiting proprietary trading. These changes are commendable and help make the rule work better. There are two remaining challenges as I see them, and the ability to overcome these challenges may not be known until we begin to implement the rule. So these challenges must be monitored carefully as the rule begins its operation. The first challenge is one that I will just underscore. It has been mentioned, and that is regulatory implementation. The proposed final rule has taken the approach of not setting explicit limits, but permitting regulated entities to set those limits through their compliance plans and then monitoring those compliance plans. This emphasis on compliance within firm-chosen limits rather than absolute thresholds means that the role of supervisors and examiners, and in particular the role of supervisor and examiner judgment and discretion, become critical. Examiners from different agencies will be leaned on heavily. For example, there have been no limits placed on the types of assets or trading strategies that can qualify for permitted activities in market making, hedging, and underwriting. Even though the Volcker Rule contains a statutory prohibition on engaging in any permitted activities in cases where such activities expose the banks to high-risk assets or trading strategies, the proposed final rule does not make clear what assets or types of assets can constitute such high-risk assets and what types of trading strategies constitute high-risk trading strategies. Instead, examiners will be asked to make these determinations. So I look forward to the formulation of guidance that assists all examiners from all the agencies in those efforts and communicates those views to the affected financial institutions so that they understand what could be problematic. Similarly, the proposed final rule would permit trading for purposes of liquidity management. But to ensure that liquidity management is not proprietary trading in disguise, we're going to have to require examiners to assure, among other things, that liquidity management is being conducted in accordance with a written liquidity management plan and that the amounts that are being held are consistent with the near-term funding needs of the financial entity. Again, these will be determinations to be made by examiners, and I believe they will need guidance when they undertake these determinations. In addition, the restrictions on inventory accumulation under the market-making and underwriting permitted activities will be determined by the regulated institutions, and examiners, again, will need to verify whether the restrictions are appropriate. Examiners will need to be willing to limit inventory buildup if the total risk accumulated under market-making and underwriting grows, either on an institutional level or within the entire system. This willingness will require consistency, fortitude, and support. Compounding the role of single examiner judgment is the fact that institutions within the purview of the Volcker Rule are examined differently. The SEC may bring one perspective to its supervision of broker-dealers, and the OCC may bring a different perspective to its supervision of national banks. So I look forward to the issuance of supervisory guidance and training regarding the exercise of supervisory judgment, and will want to assess the effectiveness of the agencies in engaging in interagency coordination of their approaches and their perspectives and their findings. The second challenge regards the compensation provisions of the proposed final rule. And the proposed final rule, as you've indicated, it merely states that the compensation structures can't be designed to reward or incentivize prohibited proprietary trading. This statement in the rule may, in fact, be enough to alleviate concerns that the design of compensation practices at financial institutions that engage in proprietary trading is still a source of financial instability. But we can't be sure until we see. In other words, it seems to me that if we're serious about minimizing financial instability in the context of the Volcker Rule, then we have to engage in some scrutiny of the design of compensation plans and ask ourselves whether various pay arrangements are thwarting the rule's goals by inducing traders and others to accept excessive levels of risk, despite the existence of compliance plans, metrics, and CEO attestations. Because bank risk-taking imposes costs on the public and the economy that shareholders don't always internalize, shareholders' interests may be served by greater risk-taking than is in the interest of the public and the economy. This is the well-known moral hazard problem, and compensation regulation is justified by the same moral hazard reasons that underlie our long-standing system of prudential and macro-prudential regulation of banks. Substantive regulation of the terms of compensation, in other words, specifically limiting the use of structures that reward risky behavior, can advance the goals of the Volcker Rule. As the Volcker Rule becomes implemented, regulators should focus specifically on the structure of compensation with the aim of discouraging excessive risk-taking. If we had such a focus, we could supplement and reinforce the goals of this rule. In fact, if we knew that compensation arrangements were discouraging excessive risk-taking, we would realize that direct regulation need not be as stringent as would otherwise be necessary. Conversely, as long as compensation arrangements are unconstrained, the Volcker Rule would need to be more restrictive. We need to stay vigilant to the possibility that the compensation arrangements at particular institutions will not be conducive, possibly, to the minimizing of the potential for financial instability. With those remarks, Mr. Chairman, I support the publication of the final rule and the proposal to extend the conformance period. As noted, the agencies have collectively made great strides. My recommendation is that we move forward towards implementing it, but not waver from the need to actively monitor how the rule is working, both from the need to assist examiner implementation and coordination and enforcement of the rule, and from the need to assess how the terms of compensation may be furthering or thwarting the rule's goals.
Thank you. Governor Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also support the final rule. I support the one-year extension. Just wanted to thank everybody again for their hard work. So I agree with the comments that have been made about the challenges that still lie ahead in supervision and implementation. But having said all that, I do think the rule will be helpful. I think it's important to align expectations. I completely agree with the way Mark characterized it. I don't think we should expect that this is going to prevent all future trading-related screw-ups, and that's why robust capital against any kind of trading exposure, be it market making or otherwise, is really in some sense the first line of defense. But, you know, nevertheless, I think that this rule puts in place a systematic process that forces, when we're looking at trades or at hedges or whatever, to ask the right kinds of questions. And I think that's going to be helpful, and I think it's going to meaningfully improve the odds of getting around at least some of these problems. So I'm supportive.
Governor Powell.
As I mentioned earlier, I think that the rule is very faithful to the statute. And I also think it does strike the right balance, as indicated by the statute, in permitting activities that need to continue. And so I'm happy to support it and also to support the extension.
Thank you. I also support the rule and the extension. I think the rule as written strikes a good balance between achieving the objectives of the statute to limit short-term risky proprietary trading while preserving legitimate functions like market making, hedging, and underwriting. Like as I said before, I think the implementation, and Governor Raskin said very eloquently, implementation and feedback will be very important as we learn about how the rule works and the effects on banks, but also the effects on markets and the broader economy. And I think we should be prepared to make adjustments over time.
5 regulators voted unanimously today to approve the Volcker Rule at that meeting we just saw. The rule was agreed to after 3 years of drafts and debates. Now, the Associated Press reports that the final version is stricter than many had expected and are intended to prevent risky trading that required taxpayer-funded bailouts. The New York Times writes that although the Volcker Rule is only one of 400 rules under the Dodd-Frank law and nearly two-thirds of the regulations remain unfinished, the Volcker Rule became synonymous with the law itself, and with regulators easing other rules under Dodd-Frank, the Volcker Rule became a barometer of overall strength of the law. One more vote after this one in the House.
this vote, the yeas are 346, the nays are 1. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1402 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1402, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to extend the authorization of appropriations for the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to pay a monthly assistance allowance to disabled veterans training or competing for the Paralympic team, and the authorization of appropriations for the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to provide assistance to United States Paralympics Incorporated.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
This last vote of the day on extending the Veterans Affairs Department's authority to provide certain services and payments for veterans that would otherwise expire at the end of the year, such as allowing the VA to transport individuals to and from VA facilities and to provide nursing home care to certain veterans with service-connected disabilities. There are a number of congressional leaders say they want to finish before the end of the year. The defense bill that we heard about during the last vote, the farm bill, and the 2014 budget. Politico writes that House and Senate budget negotiators are down to a small set of differences and are aiming to unveil a budget agreement by the end of the day today, according to senior aides familiar with the talks. Representative Ryan and Senator Patty Murray both briefed their colleagues Tuesday on their plan to set spending levels for the next 2 years and reorganize budget cuts set to take hold in 2014. The story goes on to say that as he emerged from a Republican leadership meeting Tuesday afternoon, Ryan said an accord was close. Top Republican and Democratic aides were working Tuesday afternoon to wrap up a deal. as this last vote of the day continues, wanted to let you know that President Obama's speech, plus some other of the events at the memorial today in South Africa, will be here on C-SPAN at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Associated Press writing that President Obama's eulogy was for Nelson Mandela, but it laid out for a global audience the work that Obama himself would like to be remembered for, an unending fight against injustice and inequality. Obama acknowledged he sometimes wonders whether he's doing enough to live up to Mandela's historic legacy. Again, that's in the Associated Press, and we'll have part of the event from today in Johannesburg here on C-SPAN at 8 Eastern.
On this vote, the yeas.
Mr. Rogers of Michigan. Mr. Rogers of Michigan votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 353, the nays are 0. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. Wait a few. You want me? In order. Give him a few. The House will be in order. The chair will now entertain requests for one-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The House will be in order. Members are asked to remove their conversations from the floor. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in October, natural gas production in the Marcellus Shale region reached 12 billion cubic feet a day. That's 6 times the production rate in 2009. To put this in perspective, the Marcellus would rank 8th in the world in gas production if it was classified as its own country. This month, the number will be exceeded yet again. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration report released today, production in the Marcellus Shale region is projected to exceed 13 billion feet per day this month. This means the Marcellus Shale is expected to provide 18% of the total U.S. natural gas production this month. This type of energy production creates American jobs, spurs economic growth, lowers energy prices, brings much-needed tax revenue to local and state governments, and begins us on a path to greater economic competitiveness. Mr. Speaker, the nation must continue to pursue policies that lower energy costs for American families and improve our energy security. If we follow the model built by states like Pennsylvania and keep the federal government from over-regulating these industries, we can achieve these goals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of my newly introduced resolution, which honors today as the 65th anniversary of Human Rights Day and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. My resolution will shed the much-needed light on the importance and the protections of human rights in our global society so we can prevent acts of suppression against people like Mr. Nguyen Thanh Trung of Vietnam, who has been unfairly jailed for democratic activism. The Congress and the world must recognize that those that are denied basic human rights, such as freedom of speech, religion, or political expression, are therefore denied an opportunity to be treated with respect and with dignity. Mr. Speaker, I urge the adoption of my resolution, and I urge all Americans to observe the 65th anniversary of Human Rights Day. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks and to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Mr. Steve Burgess from Urbana, Illinois, who passed away on Friday, November 22nd of this year. He was committed to seeing a postal facility at 302 East Green Street in Champaign, Illinois, renamed after his father, James R. Burgess, Jr. James Burgess was the first African-American elected to a county-wide office in Champaign County and was appointed the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Illinois. Most importantly, though, Steve Burgess wanted to honor his father as a leader of the 761st Tank Battalion, the first African-American armored unit to enter battle in World War II. In April, I introduced H.R. 1707 to rename this post office after James Burgess. It is devastating to me that Steve Burgess was not able to fulfill his life's effort. I want to see a post office naming bill through completion, not only in James Burgess's honor, but in Steve Burgess's and his family's. I want to offer my heartfelt thanks to Steve Burgess and his father for their lifetime of commitment to the Champaign-Urbana community. And, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the weather outside is frightful, and if you listen to certain conservative media networks, you hear something not so delightful. You hear that because it's snowing, there must not be climate change. This is unscientific, it's reductive, but that's what climate deniers say this time of year. Well, Mr. Speaker, winter happens every year, and the fact that it's snowing simply means that it's snowing. Instead of looking at December snowflakes, we should be looking at the science. Since 1970, not that long ago, winter temperatures have increased an average of 0.55 degrees per decade, reducing snowpacks and creating water shortages across the country. And if you want to look at something immediate, look at California, where we are experiencing the driest year on record. And that's why we need to start getting serious about our response to climate change. We need to adopt new policies and adapt to the changes that are happening. And one place to start is how we operate our reservoirs. Instead of relying on old-school water manuals that are decades out of date. We should be using modern science and modern weather forecasting. Our water supply, our food supply, and our future will be impacted by climate change. So let's lead.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, during the month of December, we oftentimes take time to memorialize what happened on December 7th, 1941. Unfortunately, the survivors of Pearl Harbor, we're losing them more and more each year. Today, I'd like to memorialize a friend from the Shasta County area of Northern California, Hank Reynolds, who we'd lost just recently. He's a gentleman who faithfully turned out each year to memorialize Pearl Harbor on the courthouse steps in Redding, California. He was, at one time, the chairman of the California Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, and always was there with a sharp salute. Even though these gentlemen are in their late 80s and early 90s now, they always would turn out and encourage us, encourage the youth there that day to memorialize and remember that. Hank was served on the USS Detroit and was there right in the middle of it. There were ships on either side of him being attacked. They were about to go out on leave that Sunday morning, and he returned back to his post and helped fight that battle that day. So I will miss Hank. I really enjoyed his company and seeing him at those events, and I know our country is great for having had them serve for us at that time, and we will memorialize them here today. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, critics said it couldn't be done. They said the federal government refinancing of the American automobile industry couldn't work. Thankfully, for the economy of our country, they were wrong. Wrong to denounce President Obama for his courageous decision to save America's auto sector. Yesterday, Treasury announced it was selling its last stake in General Motors, the same General Motors that critics derisively called government motors. Now the verdict is in. The automotive rescue was a huge success. Led by House Democrats, 237 out of 435 members of this House voted to save America's auto industry. The President and Democrats made a bet on the auto communities, and it paid off with dividends. Today, the auto sector supports 1 in 17 private sector jobs in this country and 1 in 8 jobs in Ohio. The workers at the Toledo Transmission Facility and the Parma Metal Center thank President Obama and the members of Congress who are willing to take the heat and do the right thing. The U.S. auto industry is back thanks to the President's leadership and those 237 members of this House. Onward, USA. I yield back my remaining time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair lays before the House the following personal requests.
Leave of absence is requested for Mr. Culberson of Texas for today, Mrs. McMorris Rogers of Washington for today and the balance of the week, Mr. DeFazio of Oregon for today, Mr. Doyle of Pennsylvania for today and Wednesday, and Mr. Rush of Illinois for today.
Without objection, the requests are granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, thank you, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very, very much. We come here about every week to talk about jobs in America. This last Friday, we held a job fair in my district in Fairfield, California. And it was a remarkable event. I've been around a long time. I've seen many, many things. As remarkable as it was also one of the saddest events I've been to. And I've been to a lot of funerals and a lot of tragedies over the years. But this one ranks very high. I put this picture up here because this is a picture of the second hour after that job fair had begun. The line outside the building where we had some 40 employers that were offering to hire people stretched over 200 yards. The temperature was about 37, 38 degrees. It was one of those cold mornings. And these people were determined to get a job. They were willing to stand in that line for up to an hour and a half, some of them perhaps even 2 hours, just to have a shot, just to be able to talk to an employer, to have the opportunity to look face to face with an employer and say, I want to work. The stories were incredible. I spent about an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes, talking to the men and women that were in this line. Young men. I remember one gentleman who had spent several tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, said he was with the Army Rangers, said he had 4 Purple Hearts, left the military, unemployed. In fact, in this line were 141 veterans, unemployed, looking for work. Skills, know when to get up in the morning, know what it takes to go to work, to put in a full day or more, unemployed. A young woman, fresh out of school, child at home, wanted to go to work. She had a associate degree in social welfare programs, human relations, anything in that area. She said, I'll take any job. I just want to go to work. I want to take care of my child. Another woman, 50, 55, divorced, 18-year-old child. The alimony's over. I got to go to work. I've got to support myself. The stories of life, the stories of America, the stories of 971 people that stood in line just to have a shot at a job. There's 435 of us in this room on a full day. We have a job. We're employed. We have a good wage. We have a very good wage, and we have health care. And we're not doing our job. We're not doing the job that America sent us here for. America sent us here to put America back to work. That's our job. We're not living up to that. 2 years ago, the President of the United States put forth in his State of the Union message an American jobs plan. An American jobs plan to put people in this nation back to work. It was complete. Education, retraining, a research component for the next sector of this economy for the future. A transportation infrastructure sector. A way to finance it. 2 years ago, 971 people standing in the cold in Fairfield, California, just wanting a shot at a job. And here we are, 2 years after the President of the United States put forward a jobs plan for America. Has not been done. The majority in this House has refused to bring up even one of those programs. We're going to talk about those things tonight. Those things that we can do here in America, that we can do. So that when 971 of my constituents are willing to line up to get a job, they'll have one. They'll have that opportunity. They'll have a shot at the future. It's a disgrace that after 2 years with a complete plan that would put people back to work, the majority has refused to bring forward any part of that legislation. It's a disgrace. It's time for this country to go back to work, and it's time for this House to go back to work, to put Americans back on the job. You want to deal with the deficit? Put people to work. They'll become taxpayers. You want to deal with food stamps? You want to cut food stamps? Put people to work. Build the infrastructure. Put the teachers back in the classroom. But no, you're going to slash the benefits. These people searching for a job know that unless this Congress, I see our esteemed leadership and the Republicans leaving this House, leaving this floor, these people want to go to work. They're losing in the next week, 2 weeks, the unemployment benefits. What will become of them? What will become of those 971 people, including 141 veterans who have fought, who have been wounded? What's going to become of them? Joining me today are my colleagues on the Democratic side. I'd like to start with my colleague from Illinois, Mr. General Bill Enyart, who is now a member of the House of Representatives. Bill, please join us.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. You know, I'm privileged to represent the people of southwestern Illinois, that swath of the great state running along the Mississippi River from just north of St. Louis, from Alton, Illinois, all the way south to Cairo. And those 12 counties of southern Illinois, southwestern Illinois, were once an industrial powerhouse. It was said 4 decades ago, 5 decades ago, if you wanted to work, go to East St. Louis, Illinois, and there'll be a job for you there. There were jobs in the steel mills. There were jobs in the packing houses. There were jobs in the stove foundries in Belleville. There were jobs in the coal mines of southern Illinois. Those jobs are, by and large, gone today. There are a few bright spots. There have been U.S. Steel has a plant in Granite City that's still pouring steel. Alton Steel in Alton, Illinois is reopened. A local entrepreneur bought it, and they're pouring steel in Alton again. But you know, those jobs in the packing houses are gone. The jobs in the aluminum industry, those jobs are gone. And that's why they call it the Rust Belt, because so many of those factories are closing and rusting away. Technology has changed a lot of that, and we need to adapt to that technology. And to that end, the Assistant Minority Leader, Mr. Steny Hoyer, along with Mr. Garamendi, and myself introduced the JOBS Act. That JOBS Act is sitting here. It needs to be acted upon. We can't get the leadership to act upon it, but we introduced this JOBS Act, and we introduced it because there are really 4 priority areas that are central to achieving manufacturing growth in this country. Again, first of all, we need to have a national manufacturing strategy. Other countries have it. We need to have one. We need to have a strategy that pushes our manufacturing. Secondly, we need to promote the export of U.S.-made goods. Thirdly, we need to encourage businesses to bring jobs and bring innovation back to the shores of our country. And lastly, we need to train and secure a 21st century workforce. And that's really what the JOBS Act does. That act invests in our future. It invests in our infrastructure, our human infrastructure, the people who drive those machines, the people who drive our economy. And, you know, it was interesting that Mr. Garamendi mentioned food stamps. I want to talk about food stamps for just a minute because far too many people in my district survive on food stamps. And something over 60% of the people on food stamps are children. It's not people who aren't working because they don't want to be working. 60% are children who are in low-income families. And the bulk of the adults who are on food stamps are working adults, and they're working in minimum wage jobs. They're working in fast food restaurants, or they're working in other minimum wage jobs. And you can't raise a family in southern Illinois on a minimum wage job. We need to have jobs that pay a living wage with good health insurance, with good fringe benefits that provide a living wage for families. When you do that, what happens? You don't have people on food stamps. You don't have people on unemployment. You instead have people who are paying taxes. You have people who are spurring the economy. You have people who are buying new pickup trucks and new curtains for the living room and so on and on. And that it generates an economy that generates good jobs. Now, to talk about our Jobs Act that Mr. Garamundi and Mr. Hoyer and I introduced, what does it do? You know, it's designed to support advanced manufacturing. Now, why do we want to support advanced manufacturing? We want to support advanced manufacturing because, and there was an article in the Wall Street Journal just the other day, happen to have it right here, Wall Street Journal, the Journal of American Business. Manufacturing jobs pay nearly 40% more than other jobs in our nation's economy. That's why we need advanced manufacturing. So our bill, Mr. Garamundi's bill, my bill, Mr. Hoyer's bill, would amend the Workforce Investment Act to provide targeted investment to partnerships of community colleges, local workforce investment boards, and advanced manufacturing firms to design and implement education and training programs for current and prospective workers. Now, currently the Trade Adjustment Assistance Community College Program does provide some funding for that type of thing, but unfortunately there's no assurance for investments in advanced manufacturing, and that's where we need to go in this nation. You know, what we need to do is to align the training opportunities for those advanced manufacturing firms for their needs for adaptability in the training of workers. You know, I toured the Anheuser-Busch Brewery in St. Louis. I've got a
one
lot
of those in my district, too.
And I toured that brewery a couple of weeks ago. And the plant manager told me, the brewery manager told me that in 1999, they had 3,500 hourly employees, and those were good jobs. Those are good jobs. Anybody can tell you that if you work, you had a union brewery job working for Anheuser-Busch, that was a job you'd have for your entire life. That'd be a great career for a working man. And today, they're down from 3,500 to 785 jobs. Now, that's due largely to technology, to improve technology, and they simply didn't need that many workers anymore. But that displacement of workers has happened throughout our economy, and it's happened in other areas of the economy in addition to breweries. And so we need to grow the kind of advanced manufacturing jobs, and we need to have the workers who have the skill to move up so they're not working in those minimum wage jobs and getting food stamps and on Medicaid and those other government programs that are, and instead we need people who are paying money in. And that's what our jobs bill does. And I know that Mr. Garamundi and Mr. Hoyer and I want that bill to come to a vote. We believe that bill would pass with a resounding bipartisan vote if simply the leadership would allow it to be brought to the floor for a vote. And advanced manufacturing is growing in this country. It's increasing. But the problem is it's not growing fast enough. When we look at our economy over the last 5 years, since President Obama won election the first time and has managed to halt the, you know, we lost, 5 million jobs when he was first elected virtually immediately, and we've been growing those jobs back, 200,000 a month, 200,000 a month, 195,000 a month. We need to grow them back faster, and we can do that with this Jobs Act. So with that, I'd like to yield back to my partner and friend here, Mr. Garamundi.
Well, thank you very much, General Enyart.
Enyart.
Excuse me. I was thinking about another.
It's like a real estate sign, in your yard.
There you go. Thank you very much. Joining us also is another